As soon as you accept the axiomatic premise that rights come from human beings, you must, by definition, accept that rights can be abolished by human beings. The end. If we brought something into existence, we can remove it from existence. Rights do not come into existence through human beings. We are not the creator of rights. We are not the bestower of rights in any form, whether it's from an individual or a society or a government. And when we ask people where rights come from, only a handful of people actually really got the correct answer and said rights come from creation, nature, God, whatever you want to call it, the laws of nature. Doesn't matter how you verbalize it, the word or label is meaningless. It comes from a higher power than man. The end. That's it. And if you don't believe that exists, you have not done enough study, observation, and testing of what has happened throughout all of human history. This was a system of slavery being directed by social engineers and the most powerful people in human civilization, as far as what resources they had at their command and how much they actually held sway and thrall over the human mind. Culturally, they were the culture creators, they were the social engineers, and ultimately they were the master psychologists that had dark occult knowledge. They had the knowledge of the occult, and they were using it for totally abusive, dark purposes, namely to enslave. And ultimately, really to cull, which is one of their agendas. We are collectively the controllers of our destiny as human beings. You know, there's no one doing this ultimately to us externally. We are doing this to ourselves in the long term. Okay, you could talk about manipulation, you could talk about things trying to be pushed one way or another, but ultimately our will ultimately directs it. What will we do? It's not about speculation and just thinking. It's not about intention. It's about behavior. You know, we're going to be judged not on what we thought, what we intended, okay, how we emoted, what our emotions were. We will judge ourselves and our own progress and evolutionary development based on what we did, what our actions were. That's what ultimate value is going to come down to, what we did or did not do. And right now, we're falling into the divide and conquer strategy of the social engineers. And we have to get out of that mindset of us versus them. Yeah, there is people who believe in order following, you know, and they have to get out of that mindset. We can't keep taking this idea of we're just going to be fighting each other. That's what the social engineers want. They don't want us uniting and understanding the occult principles they're operating on and ultimately overturning their mind control, not falling for it anymore. That's the last thing they want. Is it possible? Yes, it's still possible. Is it likely? Not based on how humanity's going. We're not exerting our will to understand what we need to understand, to learn what we need to learn, and ultimately to stop buying into dialectics, because that's exactly what they want. They want slaves fighting each other instead of understanding how the slaves are being manipulated to stay in slavery by what they are conditioned to believe is necessary, is somehow moral, when in fact it's violent, coercive, and creating more slavery. And now we're in an era of censorship of information and words and the communication of ideas. That's how crazy the slaves have gone, believing that their masters have a right to rule them, that they actually want to take information like this away from people so that it can never reach their eyes and ears and they can never understand that they're slaves. You know, that's how bad things have gotten. I mean, if you believe that, you never go in search of what the truth is about what's happening within yourself or external to yourself. And you're sunk from the beginning. You know, that's a total sabotage from the very beginning, solipsism. That's why I called it the biggest lie. You know, but guess what? This is where most people are at today. They've been conditioned by the social engineers to say, my emotions matter more than facts. And if this hurts my feelings, then I don't accept it as being true. You know, you reason like that, that's solipsism. That's not reason at all. It's a belief system that we have to purge from the human mind. And you tell people that, and they want to do harm to you. You're telling them the solution can never lie in something like solipsism or the belief in authority, and that the mind has to be changed before the external world could change in any way. And they'll get angry at you for telling them they have to change the way they think when their thinking is the actual cause of the problem that we are experiencing, and they don't yet understand that. You know, that's what we have to start teaching people as a group of people who claims that we understand this information. And again, in order to do that and to get it out there, if you're going to bang your head against the wall forever if you think you're going to do that one-to-one as an individual. Human beings can decide and set what right and wrong are. Right and wrong are there for you to learn. They are there for you to discover what they are and then align your behavior to them so that you can perform right action and reap positive consequence collectively as a species, namely true freedom, and not perform wrong behavior, which will give you the consequence in the aggregate of enslaving you, of putting you deeper and deeper into bondage as a species. And what the out of control ego that doesn't want to acknowledge it's wrong, doesn't want to admit a higher power exists, and doesn't want to acknowledge natural law is a satanic mindset. It's the force that will not allow us to acknowledge that we are wrong. And eventually it turns into the satanic mindset of I am God. I will control everything. I will dictate what right and wrong are. That's really all it is. The belief that human beings are God and we invent what is right and what is wrong for ourselves, not the right way of discovering what those things are and aligning our behaviors to them. Because ultimately, this is what we're doing when we take that mindset, folks. We're watering a tree that we have a noose tied around our neck to one of its branches. And you know how that ends up. That tree, we're continuing to feed that tree of evil, and it grows and grows and grows until it pulls us right up, off of our feet and hangs us. And that's where we're at. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about getting out of this self-loathing, suicidal way of life. And that is done by really understanding how wellness is manifested, or fitness, you could call it. Wellness, fitness, strength of the individual, and then strength of the whole society. Because this does extend beyond the individual and it goes to the aggregate of society. Because the individuals comprise the aggregate. There's so many different dimensions to wellness. We not need only mental wellness. We need emotional wellness, physical wellness, intellectual wellness, financial wellness, social wellness, secureness in what we do, what we choose to do, occupationally, environmental wellness, and most of all, the thing that underlies them all, spiritual wellness. Why are we in this position, this suicidal, killing ourselves position by what we believe and what we are attached to and refuse to let go of, and we are watering that thing and making it grow and grow and grow, instead of cutting it off and saying, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. Where does that come from? It comes from ultimately deep-seated self-loathing psychologically. But ultimately, where does that come from, folks? It comes from being cut off from true spirituality. And being cut off from true spirituality comes from a mindset that spirit either doesn't exist or is meaningless, or that we have no true connection to it or no method of connecting to it. Everybody is allowing themselves to be enslaved because they fear death. But slavery is worse than death. This is where the idea of freedom or death. It's not a matter of should we just survive. Just physical survival without freedom is a prison. It's torture. It's worse than dying. It's worse than ceasing to physically exist, because the spirit is what's being killed and tortured. And that's where we're at as a species, where we're at a point where our species is at spiritual torture because we're not free. Okay? And the beginning of that process of allowing ourselves to be enslaved in that way is the fear of death, because we've bought into the notion that the physical is all there is, that there is no such thing as spiritual, and we're in existential crisis of believing that physical death is the cessation of all consciousness and spirit. And it's just not true. And you have to lose that existential fear to actually gain the courage to really do what's necessary to become free. And most people don't have that courage, unfortunately. I'm not saying none do, but way more don't have it than do have that level of courage. That's why only 3% of the inhabitants actually fought in the Revolutionary War. Most other people are just too cowardly to say, I'll put my physical life on the line because living as a slave is far worse than dying. And that's how I feel about the whole construct that we're living in, the experience. You know, the whole idea is the experience is what is important. It's to be learned from, you know, not to be attached to. Most people have attachment to physical life instead of looking at the experience as something to learn and grow from. But in order to do that, we have to have the possibilities available unto us that freedom allows. And that's why I think it is more important to be free than it is to just maintain physical continuation of life. Life being sustained could turn into ultra ugly things that are far worse than death.